So we have a fun and maybe a little different keynote this morning. When we talked about it, we said let's not have one of us flap our gums, let's have a little to and fro, and we kind of derived this whole concept of doing a little back and forth from a supply and demand, obviously centered around what's the deal with the enterprise and how are we solving problems there. But I do have to ask Cris to go easy on me.
Maybe.
Because I know you're going to have a lot of questions. So if we have time, certainly you can raise your hand. We'll try and take some questions from you guys. So we'll get right into it. Ready?
Go for it.
So the big thing is supply and demand. Obviously from representing a lot of the enterprise building environments and JMA Wireless as a technology provider in this space, the big question is from the demand side, right? We all know there's a lot of buildings out there. We all hear the stories. And I'd ask Cris, you know, is the need real, right? You guys represent how many buildings?
16,000 billions of square feet of space in the U.S.
So a significant portion of those numbers.
Yes.
And what do you guys see, you know, if I look at these numbers, what's the, you know, of your square footage of demand? Is it, you know, penetration of coverage solutions, a big number, a small number?
I think that it's a big number. I think that right now, you know, we're just beginning to see the tip of the iceberg on the demand. People are really coming, you know, with the increase in data usage, people are really, you know, beginning to see that these systems are absolutely essential. They are the fourth utility, and you have to get out in front of the problem and start solving for it.
Yeah, I think, and it generally seems to be a consensus across the industry that it is a whole, it is a need.
Yes. Well, which industry? Commercial real estate? I think that in telecom, we talk about this all the time. This is, you know, we understand it's a need. I think that commercial real estate is slowly coming to that, but I feel like we're on the upside of that roller coaster, and we're getting very close to that tipping point where that need is going to become kind of overwhelming.
Well, and you know, one of the things we talk about, you mentioned the fourth utility. So, you know, you live and breathe this every day with a lot of your building owners and their tenants. Do they see it as the fourth utility? Is that the right label?
Again, I think they're beginning to see it as the fourth utility. I do think it's the right label, though. I think that it is something that it's not an amenity. For a long time, it was talked about as an amenity. It's really, though, it's absolutely necessary to have cellular connectivity in most buildings.
And, you know, one of the big underlying questions is always who pays for this stuff, right? And, you know, I lease some buildings as part of our business, and of course have utility fees or CAM fees, most of which today do not include mobile connectivity or cellular coverage as part of that fee. Do you think it's reasonable? Is it going to happen that that's part of your CAM fees for leased buildings?
I think it is reasonable. The thing about CAM fees they're very building specific. So it's one of these things that, you know, the systems are all snowflakes on the telecom side, and then the buildings are all snowflakes on the real estate side. And so there are cases where you can build that into a CAM charge, but it really is dependent on the specific agreements that the building has in place already.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think our industry generally talks about this as the fourth utility, and the problem we're, of course, all struggling with and trying to solve for is how do you actually get it to a level where you know exactly what to do to get it put in place, and then how do you monetize it, how do you fund it, right? So it's other alternatives out there, right? Why not just do Wi-Fi?
And I get that question a lot. Wi-Fi calling, though, it has its purpose, you know, but, you know, it's not a seamless system. Really, if you're talking about, say, Class A office space and you want a world-class solution, I don't personally feel that Wi-Fi calling is that world-class solution. You want a seamless experience coming in the front door, up to the office, down to the common areas. So, at least at this point, that's not where Wi-Fi calling is, and you really need an LTE solution.
And so today in most of those buildings, Wi-Fi is not part of the CAM.
Often, the tenants deal with the Wi-Fi themselves.
So you got independent Wi-Fi solutions,
Yes.
varying quality.
Varying quality. So
impacts.
so if you don't have a robust enough system, is that going to, what's that going to do in terms of your Wi-Fi calling?
Yeah.
There's all of these, I think that people think that the Wi-Fi is kind of free, so then you don't have that funding problem if you can use
There's
Wi-Fi
no
calling.
IT guys, it just comes out of the sky.
Yeah, so the magic, the IT elf comes down.
Yeah, and it's, obviously from a supply perspective, the question is, what are you missing? And most of what we see is that you have users who want consistent experience when they're using their mobile device for business use, in particular, which means that you hate it when a phone call drops, period, much less when it drops consistently every time you leave your Wi-Fi space. Now, in our industry, we've gotten, I think, used to cellular having pretty reasonable quality, even as you're moving around from place to place. And at least certainly what we've seen is that when you do utilize Wi-Fi calling, you have to ensure that that Wi-Fi network and everything behind it can carry that voice traffic with certain quality of service, right?
Absolutely.
And most of the Wi-Fi systems that are put in enterprises don't really have to take that into consideration.
They're not solving for Wi-Fi calling. I mean, that's not the
Exactly.
original intent of the system usually, so.
Yeah, good point, good point. Well, and then of course, in the chart we have up here, we talked a lot about Wi-Fi calling related to phone calls. You've got other things like text messaging might work, might not, right? And then certainly location related stuff, and we have some impending location stuff from the FCC, right? Meaning that the FCC is mandating that you got to have tighter E911 location stuff in buildings. So a lot of things coming at us there.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you get that public safety issue involved, then it's a whole other ballgame. So.
Yeah, then you got public safety added onto the list. So a lot of different things you can solve, and probably a need for both, I think, is what you're seeing.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Well, the other animal is you only need one carrier, right?
Yeah, yes, pick one. No, we absolutely, I mean, if you're going to call it the fourth utility, if that's really what we're going with, I'm sorry, I'm losing my mic, just one second. If you're going to call it the fourth utility, you really need to solve for all four carriers. You need a neutral solution because a utility is not intended to be exclusive to, one particular carrier.
Right, right.
You want everybody's phone to work, not just,
Yeah, and I think
carrier A there.
you've probably seen as well, this thing in the enterprise industry they call BYOD, bring your own device. Well, the good thing for the enterprise is it lowers the cost of funding the assets of mobile phones on behalf of the company. The downside is it means typically that user is utilizing whatever carrier they already have. So how do you support those inside?
Well, it's not just BYOD. Even if you have an enterprise solution for for cell phones, if you have an agreement with a carrier, I have a work cell phone and I have a personal cell phone, and they happen to be on the same carrier, but I know a lot of people that do that and don't. So, and you want to be able to use both at work. I mean, that's it. Nobody wants to not be able to use their personal cell phone at work. So,
Of what you've seen, do you see a demonstrable number of tenants or enterprises saying, we're going to go on one service and everybody's going to get a single carrier phone, or is it fairly open?
I've not seen.
You haven't seen that?
No.
So really the demand for multiple carrier solutions is still a big issue.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm driving part of that, but I mean, the property owners and the managers really do perceive, and especially once you explain to them, do a little education, tell them that, if you put in a system for one carrier, if one carrier comes in and puts in a system, it doesn't serve everyone because there is some confusion around that sometimes. Once they realize that and they realize that, then we want to be carrier neutral. We want to have everybody in the building, right. And we want to make sure that we're solving for all of our tenants' issues and not just some of them.
And how often do you find building owners, do they have an appreciation for how the problem gets solved today?
I don't think so. That's part of,
that's why you're here.
Well, that is why I'm here, because, I think that this space, as everybody knows, everybody in this room knows, has changed very rapidly. it really was, to a large extent, kind of a wait for a carrier to show up and offer me a free system, and that does not happen, very often anymore. And it is, there's a growing understanding of the importance of these systems, and now, I'm here to educate and say, okay, now you know you have this need. The case study that I was working on recently, and is hopefully nearing its completion, started with one building in a major city that was about 1,200 tenants daily, 480,000 square feet. There was a real sense of urgency to get a system in this building because it was LEED Gold certified, so there was no available signal coming in from the macro network. And tenants had been complaining for quite a while, and we're approaching tenant rollover, lease rollover. So within a fairly short period of time that would not accommodate our usual, 18-month, possibly, provisioning of signal source from certain carriers, our timeline wasn't going to accommodate that. And we got actually we're fortunate that while we went to, I thought you left out the carriers there, it's good. So we got very fortunate that we were working with an owner that actually had been offered a different solution that would have been no cost to the building, but really understood that he needed, for this Class A office space, to have the best solution in the building and something that was going to serve the tenancy long term. And so the ownership decided to actually, with fairly little angst, to fund the system. It was in a case where the CAM charges actually could not cover the cost of the system. And we went to Verizon, and they agreed very readily to bring signal to the building. And then we're working with T-Mobile is in process, and AT&T are kind of, AT&T and Sprint are kind of in the future. But it was a very fortunate situation where we got carriers on board very rapidly, but it is not always the case. But what's great about this is we're working with the ownership is a REIT, a major real estate investment trust, that really sees the value in these systems and is looking to replicate this. And so when I'm talking to the carriers about getting signal source for this building, I'm saying, listen, we're the world's largest commercial real estate management firm. I'm working with one of the world's largest, 30 largest REITs. Let's find a way here to, kind of create this relationship, see the bigger picture, see that long term we're serving your needs by educating and driving ownership to the realization that they have to pay for these systems. The carriers aren't going to show up and do it, and then in exchange you really need to help me provision safety.
So it's interesting because this is owner-funded system.
Owner-funded.
And the driver was they were going to lose tenants.
They were, yes, absolutely.
Which empty building creates no revenue. So now you leverage this, right?
We leverage this. There's a second building across the plaza from this one that actually is another 280,000 square feet. There's only 2 tenants, both of whom had enterprise relationships with carriers, but there was no system in the building. And the issue with that building was that the macro network was insufficient. It worked fine on the street, but the usable signal inside the building was basically just non-existent. So we talked to the asset manager at the REIT and said, we can actually provision a second building from, I know I'm just going to hold it, a second system. We can provision that building with the equipment from, the head-end equipment from the first building. And this is a guy that knew nothing about telecom when we started this conversation, and is now, was so thrilled with this idea that they'd agreed to fund the system in the second building as well, and they're funding conduit and fiber to connect the two, all owner-funded. And they actually he saw the value in owning that fiber piece too, that connection between those two. We said, we can find you another solution for that. And he said, nope, I want to own it. I want to control that asset.
Interesting. So it's one example, or arguably 2 examples of 2 buildings of cases where a real interest in saying it's important enough for that enterprise that they're going to build it into some of their capital funding.
Yes.
And put it in the building, which I think is a trend certainly we've seen out there, is that people are to the point where if I know where to get it and I know what to do, I can fund part of this. which is a big transition, I think, in our industry.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just talking with the head of our Premier Properties group first thing this morning, and I mean, that's part of our like Premier Property transition process is looking at these, you know, what is the cellular signal like in the building, and then the real, and he very easily came to the realization, you know, that ownership was going to have to fund these things, that the carriers are no longer showing up, so.
Yeah, well, probably a good transition for all of us, so.